Hello, tech leaders. I'm Carol Palombini, psychologist and tech leadership coach, and this is my podcast, Tech Mind Insights. My mission is to be the change agents for tech leaders grappling with communication issues, imposter syndromes, burnout, and the complexities of the tech leadership roles. In this show, I interview leaders and consultants working in the tech space to provide you with real world insights into the changes of leadership. If you want to be part of the show and have questions you'd like me to ask my guest, send me an email or a DM on LinkedIn. And today, my guest is Jonathan Schultz. Jonathan is a software industry veteran and the founder and principal hiring strategy for Hire in Reverse, based in Austin, Texas. His mission is to help software teams eliminate indecision when hiring and build cohesive, high-performing teams that are easy to lead and fun to work with. He coaches interviewing and discovery techniques in concert with done-for-you search because he believes this is the fastest and most intuitive way to master accurate hiring. So, Jonathan, welcome to Tech Minds Insights.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So, first, tell our audience, what is it that you do in your own words?
Well, you did a great job of explaining what I do now. Maybe just a little background will be helpful. I spent my first 10 years in software startups as an insider, and that was great. And I delivered what managers asked for, but I reached a point where I was feeling like it wasn't clear that I was helping them. I was delivering, they were hiring, but some teams did great. Some teams didn't do great, and some teams had more turnover. And so I started to observe and make notes and study, and I kind of started my next, iteration of growth. Right? How do I help my managers do this well instead of just pipelining candidates and building teams that maybe are going to work, maybe it won't. So when I reached the point where I had multiple projects that just didn't go great. I felt like I was getting hired to do a job, and it really wasn't what they wanted. They wanted me to just put candidates into the pipeline fast, and they weren't concerned about whether it was going to work out or not. And the more times you butt heads with the people that you're reporting to, at some point you reach that moment where you don't have a choice, right? You're like, I got to get out of here. I've got to find a different way. And so I started my own agency, thinking that would be the right answer. But I wasn't finding that there was that opportunity to teach and train and coach and improve things. I was still just putting people into the process, and I could put the right people into the process, but oftentimes what was given to me wasn't right. And despite how I tried to draw out of the managers what it was that was needed to make great hires and build great teams, I've still felt like that was inadequate. And so that's the process that I went through to get where I'm at now. Now I teach and train and coach as part of every search. And if somebody, I find that managers either that's exactly what they're looking for that kind of help, or they're not. So it's not this, oh, should we work together? Should we not work together? No, it's pretty plain to see, and it's the top managers that are already doing things extremely well, that are really intent on wanting to learn more and wanting to grow and wanting to fine tune, and we sync up very quickly. And so that's what's brought me to where I'm at now.
Yes, amazing that you mentioned this, because you were mentioning the leaders that actually understand their leadership role in the hiring process. They want to improve that side of it, probably because they understand how strategic this is to having a high performance team. I worked a lot in HR in the selection process, like ages ago, until 2016, because I was already managing the area, but I was not actually doing it. But one of the problems I had was that I noticed that most leaders didn't think that this was their role. It was an HR role to bring like perfect people to them, and that they would just select and pick those people. They never saw themselves as a way to attract the best candidates. their leadership style, their leadership way, their conversation could be attracting or making these candidates decide for some other company, for working for some other leader. So this is something that I noticed that you mentioned. You have to have this growth mindset in order to understand your role in the hiring process and take advantage of this as a strategy, right?
It's absolutely, I mean, and I don't expect a hiring manager to think the way a recruiter would think, and which means it's my job to attract good people, right? Great managers are automatically going to come to that conclusion by themselves pretty quickly. Maybe I shouldn't say it. Yes, but maybe it's the part of the process that you go through, right? When you lose good candidates somewhere in the process, shouldn't you, it's natural to start asking, what could we have done differently? Versus blame it on HR, blame it on recruiting, or they brought me the wrong person, right? And so it's a constant give and take. I feel like I've learned over the years to ask facilitative questions to try to drive that thought process and say, well, you know, did you get the sense along the way that this guy was not going to make it through the process, or that he was going to opt out? Because on my side of the process, I'm going to make sure that I know what the candidate is thinking. If they have another company they're interviewing with that they're really interested in, I'm going to be asking conversational questions along the way to understand which one they're leaning toward, right? I don't want to waste our time. If we need to opt out of an interview process and not spend another 5 engineering hours on interviews, then we should be doing that, not bringing them all the way to the offer stage and going nowhere.
How important it is for leaders to have a good communication in order to make a good conversation and make a good interview.
Oh, it's critical. Every manager has to be able to communicate honestly and transparently what the job is about and what being on their team is going to look like. And the less effective you are at that, the more chance you have of hiring someone who's not quite a fit, that's going to last not as long as you'd like. We call it early turnover. You could also just call it a mishire. You know, if you're not hiring someone who's a great fit for your team and has a good chance of growing with you for long term, then why would that be a good hire, right? So, and you know, a manager maybe doesn't have direct responsibility of upgrading his team's communication skills, right? But they should be modeling good communication skills. You know, if your meetings are transparent and you know what you're being told, what you're being told by your leader is truthful and honest, and then you can give feedback and you can ask hard questions. But if there's this veil of, you know, we're all just kind of agreeing to agree that, you know, what he's saying probably isn't really the facts, you know. I don't know. I remember a conversation you had, I think it was with, caught one of your podcasts, and you guys got in. Yeah. You guys got deep into the topic. So, but yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, and you can have different people on your team that have a varying level of communication skills and still perform extremely well, right? I mean, you might want somebody who's the analyst that's really sitting back and thinking through and taking notes, and he may not say a thing until you get to that critical decision point where it's like, okay, let's run with this. And he's like, hold on, I got a question. And then it opens, you know, the whole door. So we don't need, you know, we need a balance.
Yeah, you know, I've interviewed candidates that when I was coaching them, that while we were speaking and he was talking about his job, he was like in love. You could feel the passion that he had for what he was doing. So when he said, okay, so now let's do this, the interview simulation. And then the person like disappeared. All that passion disappeared and the person became like a robot answering the questions. So I know what you mean. If you don't fully understand how communication works and how communication can be different with different personality styles, then you're going to miss out on understanding this good candidate. What I find very useful when you are talking about what you mentioned about putting this team together, what is it that the team needs? It's actually having a picture of this team. So one of the things that I noticed that leaders make a lot of mistakes in hiring is focusing on a specific individual and not in the dynamic of that group. Not that next person will balance the dynamic or increase something in the dynamic of that group. I like to use, for instance, DISC or personality reports for the group that you can see to have this outside vision of your team dynamics. You can use also Hurston and Blanchard, which is a situational leadership chart, which is super amazing as well. But the important thing is that once the leader understand that this is their role, that this is part of the strategy, of the leadership strategy, there are many tools that you can use to improve this decision making and not be just focused on what you hated in the last person that left your team, just to replace it for something that you like, instead of assessing the big picture.
Well, the phrase you just said, the person that you like, that's kind of maybe one of the biggest red flags, right? I mean, how often are we not catching our own bias by putting an interview structure around that will help us catch the bias? I mean, we all want to hire people that we get along with, that we hit it off with immediately, right? And it's easy to have a conversation with them, but is that the right thing? And if you're a certain personality and you're looking for someone who's much more analytical, maybe you're looking to fill out your team with that person who's maybe much more quiet, good communicator, but quiet and analytical, but that's not the kind of person that you would hit it off with. Well, then we have a problem in the hiring process, right? We're setting ourselves up for making hiring decisions that aren't based on objective facts about this is what we want. We're letting a lot of other things into it. So, and that's painful.
Perfect. And okay, so now tell us, what are the biggest mistakes leaders usually make when they are in the hiring process?
Biggest mistakes. How much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. Biggest mistakes. I think we start with how we define the job. I mean, we have to start giving candidates, well, maybe we don't have to, but if we want an efficient and effective process, we need to start giving more earlier in the process. And that starts with defining the job as objectives and deliverables, not just as a list of skills, right? 1 million people might have that list of skills, but only a small handful are actually going to be interested in that job and want that job because of all the details, right? And so if we want to have the candidate have enough information to know whether he wants to submit his name for the role, we need to get more information out sooner, right? So big mistakes. Well, I think interview skills, and I know that sounds, I shouldn't have said interview skills, but just maybe style of interview choice. The difference between slipping into this phase of being more of an interrogation than a conversation is just natural. And it's natural because we use advertising to create applicants. And when we get this influx of applicants, we're not thinking of trying to determine we're not looking for their best skills. We're trying to weed out the wheat. Does that make sense? It's kind of a backward process. And if we can flip that perspective where we're constantly looking to prove that someone is great and is going to be a good fit in the role, that's different than trying to come up with reasons where I say, no, don't want this one. And so just that one small change changes the mood of the interview. It changes the ease of conversation. Because, the second you ask me a really hard question and I feel put on the spot, I shouldn't say that. It's good to ask hard questions, but are you asking in a way that allows someone to respond with their best skills and great examples of how they have those skills? Or are you putting them on the spot where they feel like they need to defend themselves, where they're going to be tempted to exaggerate? All of these things are creating additional roadblocks in your interview process to getting good decision data, right? That's what we want. We want to make great decisions, but we're
Yeah.
not going to make great decisions if we continually use tools and techniques and methods that shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yes, and it reminds me of that mindset, the school mindset. You're there to trick the person and with tricky questions to see if they pass the test. Instead
Right.
of, I want to get to know this person and see if they can actually contribute to the challenges I have now. This school mindset follows us through our entire life, and it's in the side of the candidate as well. The candidates now are changing this perspective, and they also are assessing the company, especially for psychological safety. They want to join companies that they feel they can speak up, they feel they're free. So imagine facing a leader that's making an interrogation, almost hoping for you to slip on some point. How nervous you are. What's the assessment this candidate will have of this company, of these leaders? Will they ever want to work with a leader that puts that much pressure on them? So the leadership interview, the interview from the leadership side is a test for the company as well. So the interviews is this two-way street. They are, the leader and the company is also being assessed, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd like to say that I'm brilliant and I concocted a method of interviewing that's just so much better. But the fact of the matter is I just stumble on ideas and think, I wonder if that would work, and I try it. And so I read about an interview process that only asked one question, and then you just continue to let the candidate talk, and you maybe just add a hint like, oh, so how many people were on your team? And you just kind of do little prompt questions along the way, but you just ask one question, and that's the whole interview. And so I thought, what if I could do an interview and never ask that initial question? What if I could just say, hey, so one of the key responsibilities in this role is this. Maybe we could talk about some of your past projects or past experience where you use this skill heavily, or you know would be a good example of whatever, you know, and then let them talk. And so there's no question, there's no new bias inserted by the question, right? Because if I ask you, hey, so, you know, critical thinking skills are really good for the, you know, important for this role, you know, and then I ask you a very direct question about, you know, hey, prove to me that you have critical thinking skills, right? So I've already inserted a type of bias in this question, and of course, maybe even put them on the spot, right? So that they have to feel like they have to exaggerate. And so you just get a lot better information, much more free-flowing, naturally honest, transparent communication happens, and great data comes out of it. Now, that sounds great, but what happens is if you don't know what to do with the data afterwards, then you're stuck, right? That sounds like, oh, well, how am I going to evaluate the candidate after that? Well, it's super easy, actually, because you can just take all the questions that you're used to asking in the interview and then ask yourself those questions after the interview. Hey, did I see evidence in Carol's background that she can do this based on all the experience that in the projects we talked about? And it's amazing how much data is really interviewed. I mean, you could record it, or you could just, you know, recall right after the interview so much great data that's in that interview process that we just completely ignore. And then we go, oh, let's make a gut feel decision.
The gut feeling decision. That's something else. I joined the conversation. I don't know if you were on this post on LinkedIn about this gut feeling in the decision making of hiring processes. And I was mentioning, how do you know this is an intuition and not a bias?
Right.
So I think that the first thing you should do is take it as a bias.
Mm-hmm.
Check it and you say, no, I don't actually think this is a bias, then it could be a good feeling. But it's so hard to make a difference between these two things that I think it's more analytical. It's more fair to have a process where you have a checklist like this. I have these questions. I have to go through a conversation with this person, and I have to check these points. And at the end of the interview, you can wait a minute, check your checklist, and then see if there's something else that you would like to ask that person. I think that when people jump into these questions right away, they miss the opportunity of getting to know the person in their authentic self. Usually, if you just say something like what you mentioned, a very open statement or a very open question, and the person say whatever it's on their mind, you usually understand what their priorities are. If they're speaking about, for instance, the tasks and responsibilities, or about the results, or about the people they worked and they made an impact with. So you can check the kind of person they are and what's most important for them. So if you jump with a question, you already decided this priority and you missed out on the opportunity to know this person better, that in the end is going to be working with you on a daily basis.
Yeah. I trying to think the exact phrasing I use. Oftentimes when I'm discussing with a manager and I'm not getting the information I need, I say, okay, hold on. I think I understand now. What you're saying is that what you really want to do is you want to start the interview process after you've made the offer.
Mm.
And they kind of freeze, as they should, because the truth of the matter is if your interview process doesn't accomplish anything, it's not designed around getting the information you need, then what happens is you really start the interview process after you hire them and they start. And then you get to know them and you get to know their skills. And then, around 90 days, you're like, hey, yeah, this guy's going to be good. Or this guy's suck. Why did we hire him? Right. So that's the evil flip side of an interview process that's completely useless. And it's becoming more and more common, I fear. And not just because people are complaining about it so much. I think it's great that we have ways that people can be more public about talking about problems that need to be resolved, but solutions, I'd like to, well, and this is your area, right? You're hacking, right? This is your space where, how do you not just unearth these problems, but help leaders understand, what the process is to walk through them and to make these micro changes that are going to make their teams amazing.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think that the first, what I work with them, where I usually see is this lack of vision about how broad their role is, and to start creating like a mission statement. The first thing I work with them is putting together what you want as a result of your work. What is the impact that you want to make? And then let's understand how this will impact, for instance, your hiring process. So if you are really aware of the benefit you're putting on the table as a leader, you understand that you can be an element of retention, an element of attraction for the best candidates. That's why so many leaders are positioning themselves in LinkedIn, not because they want a job, but they are there showing they're empathetic, they're knowledgeable. And imagine a person looks at that and say, wow, this is the person I want to work with. I'm going to keep following this person until they have a position that I can join their team. And that's what you want as a leader. And usually leaders can see this. So the first thing is changing the mindset and then understanding the little communication, bad habits that they can have that can be a block in this interview process, in this conversation process. Usually, tech leaders are very data oriented, so they are focusing too much on tasks or on technical things instead of understanding the dynamics of the person. How will they interact with each other and put together this high performing team, not this high talented group of people.
Right.
So it's important to have the team mindset.
I love that you started that with helping them form in their mind a vision for where they want to go. I think I coined a phrase that I use pretty frequently, and it's building high performance teams that are easy to lead and fun to work with. That was my capsule, that is this what you want? Because this is what I'd want if I were you. And it's almost like they're like, well, I've never seen that. I mean, I've seen, other things, where that's not been, and a few of us have seen that. I mean, I've worked on teams where it was effortless.
Yeah.
And I've worked with leaders and their teams that it was seamless. We said, let's knock this out and it's done. So we all know that there's great teams and high performing teams and teams that are, what's the term? Hamstrung, where they're kind of limping along. But anyways, I don't know where that was going, but.
But in the end, I think it's all about setting up a mindset and wanting to develop this. Wanted to develop this side of it. And I think that leaders must understand this as part of their career growth as well. Because if they can show a company how valuable they are as an attraction for talent and the best candidates, they will also be working on their employability, on their value for the market. So I don't think that in today's environment, as competitive and changing as it is, that we cannot use this strategy. I think we have to be working on our leadership positioning, on our professional positioning constantly. And since most tech leaders, especially tech leaders, don't do this, if you invest in this empathetic positioning, in this positioning that will guarantee psychological safety, then you become a valuable asset.
Absolutely.
So, Jonathan,
yeah.
We're now approaching the end, unfortunately, of our conversation. Not our conversation, because we can keep talking, but about the podcast recording. And I would love it if you could give our readers a book or a content recommendation.
You can't see it behind me because they're all over here, but there's bookshelves surrounding me here. I would say and I'm always pulling old books that I've read previously off the shelf and doing a reread, because if they were good enough to get on the shelf and stay on the shelf and not get tossed, that usually means that I should probably dig in again. But recently I dug into a book that was written, I don't want to say over 10 years ago, probably, but it's First Break All the Rules. The subtitle is What the World's Greatest Managers Do Differently. And it's all based on a massive poll that Gallup did over a really long period of time. I want to say like 40 or 50 years. Huge study, and it's the perfect tool for a manager for introspection, right? They're going to find themselves somewhere in this book as they read through, talking about different styles of managers and different problems, and it gives you a glimpse at your blind spots, and it shows you your strengths through really going, oh yeah, and that's where we start figuring out how to leverage our strengths, and then either have other people help us cover some of our weakness, or we grow in improving our weak areas, right? So, but yeah, great book. First Break All the Rules. The authors were Buckingham and I don't remember.
Hoffman.
Hoffman, there we go.
Yeah, I took notes here. I love this. It's like if you're watching yourself from the outside by watching other examples, then you can mirror that and you can understand how you could be behaving in a different way. I think that is the first step to growth. Is being curious about your mind, especially about the discomfort zones. So there lies true growth. And for tech leaders, most of the case is relationship, is conversations, is the human aspect of the management that is very challenging for them, especially communication, I guess. So if you can see that from the outside, say, oh, okay, I have blind spots. The first thing is understanding we all have blind spots. So it's not something to be defensive against. It's just to be curious about how your mind works and look to find your blind spots.
Absolutely. What a key part of every hiring process, right? The more transparent we can be about those things and how our team works and what we aspire for our team to be, but we're not there yet, and here's our problems, that's not something to hide. We're not trying to sell all these things about our team. This is where we're at. That's what's going to attract someone, honestly about what your team looks like and where you're going and what you want to do. I mean, aren't we more inspired by people telling us what their aspirations are as opposed to some pitch about what we're not really yet?
Yeah, that's super true. And usually developers are also analytical people. They're all tech people, and they like that. They're not that enthusiastic about these things. They want to know the reality. They're cautious decision makers. So the more authentic you are, I think the more confidence and trust you will build, which is the very good first step for a good relationship, for retaining that talent in the long term. So, Jonathan, I want to thank you very much for being my guest today and for this wonderful conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. Look forward to doing it again.
And if you found this conversation interesting, please consider sharing it. But if you are feeling stuck in your leadership career and want to improve your leadership skills, book a chat and let's talk. Just click on the link I left on this video description, or send me a DM on LinkedIn, or I'll see you on the next episode of Tech Minds Insights. Bye.